So hello to everyone, and it's good to see whether you're new or whether you've been with us for a while. It's good to see everyone. All right, and so I'm just going to move through this. I think the record, I've been able to go through the thing, the whole book was about 40 minutes, and so I will certainly be able to answer questions at the end. Before we begin, so Lutheran Education Association is an association that has 3 separate schools. There's Lutheran High North, which is located in the Garden Oaks area, Heights area of Houston. There's Lutheran South, which is down in Friendswood, Pearland area. And then, of course, there's Westlake Preparatory Academy, and that's us out here in the Katy Richmond area. And so this is our volunteer handbook. And so we want to kind of acknowledge from the beginning that volunteer, in my experience, and for campuses that have a strong culture of parent volunteerism, each of those schools that I've enjoyed working at had just incredible school cultures. And so having parents that are willing and able to volunteer truly is a huge benefit for the school. So we're thankful that we have that. Volunteers represent a tremendous resource for our schools. They can do so many things, increase the effectiveness in schools programs and activities by providing assistance and services that would not normally be possible. One of the things that my preference as a school leader, especially as a private school leader, is to run absolutely as lean as possible when it comes to personnel. And so because that's kind of the mindset, there are times when the volunteer element is important. The volunteer element really is what gets us across the line as far as getting things done. All right, so the goal of the Lutheran Education Association is to provide a safe environment for all children, students involved in any sponsored program or activity, comfortable work conditions for all of our volunteers. The objective of the program, that all students, children and students be treated with courtesy, respect, and Christian love while participating in the programs and activities. The activities and programs be conducted in a safe and secure environment as reasonably as possible, and that children and students are properly supervised while participating in these programs and activities. Volunteers who work with children and students receive your expectations. We should give you adequate and appropriate training to be able to properly supervise and conduct programs and activities, and that you're equipped to respond and report dangers in inappropriate situations. That all volunteers who work with children and students comply with LEA's education and certification guidelines, included but not limited to selection process used to screen volunteers, signed statements from volunteers stating that the volunteer has never been formally accused, found guilty, or entered a plea of nolo contendo in any child abuse or neglect case. Signed a statement of volunteer that they understand and will abide by the LEA guidelines and policies. Volunteers receive satisfaction report from their job well done. And that's a big thing that I want everybody to kind of understand is we want you to have a positive takeaway. Every family's connection is different, and we understand that. There's going to be some families who just for whatever the makeup of that family is at that time, or just whatever's going on, that parent simply is the way that they contribute is maybe just financially through annual fund donation or those kind of things. Then we have parents, of course, that maybe the financial piece is more of a challenge, and so instead that they'll do the volunteering. Then of course we got families that are in a position to be able to do both. Whatever any family can do, I can assure you it's greatly appreciated in any context. There's not one that's preferred over the other. And so I just want to make sure that everybody has an understanding. All right, so Westlake's mission. I'm always amazed. The other day I noticed that we had 2 different mission statements that were out there. And this is, I think, option B. And so what we are currently as a school, just the faculty and staff, we are talking about our mission statement, and it's good to revisit the mission statement and see if it's still kind of a guidepost for us. So this is something that'll probably get modified before the next school year. But working from our mission, Westlake Preparatory Lutheran Academy provides the foundation and plumb line for guiding students to excellence in academics, faith, and life. Students prepare for day, tomorrow, and eternity. All right, so to kind of talk about supervision, there's of course two different kinds, and so we're just going to skip into direct supervision. And if you're a volunteer who is involved in direct supervision, and so those volunteers determined to potentially have direct supervision will need to comply with all the following components in this book. You'll have to have an application, background check, consent, acknowledgement of training, and an agreement to follow LEA guidelines and policies. And there'll be more information about those things. Examples of direct supervision: maybe a room mother on a field trip, chaperone, teacher aide, lunch mother, library assistant, coaching, bus driving, PTL officers, drama or music performances, overnight trip chaperone, basically anything that's going to have you an indirect, any kind of direct contact with children. Indirect, which, and again, maybe you're like, hey, that's me. I'm the indirect person. Those volunteers determined to have minimal or infrequent supervision of children. And but it's to read and understand LEA's guidelines, volunteer policies. You're still required to pretty much do the same thing, but you're not required to formally apply and consent to background checks or acknowledge understanding compliance. Examples of indirect supervision: concession stand worker, ticket takers, single day event helpers, adult hospitality, gala, anything really with gala, basic positions where there's limited casual contact with children and students. All right, so but any opportunity or there's lots of ways to volunteer where you wouldn't even really, be around, children. And so there's the gala is a great opportunity. If, you're like, hey, I want to be able to help, but I think my encouragement is find the way or the niche that you're able to go ahead and, work with this the best way. Non-discrimination statement. And so the Lutheran Education Association Houston does not discriminate on the basis of gender, race, color, national, or ethnic origin in the administration of our educational policies, employment practices, admission policies, scholarship and loan programs, athletic, and other school administration programs. And Psalms 127:3b reminds us that children are a gift from the Lord. And I have to remind myself of that one frequently. All right, so what is understanding child abuse? And so what is child abuse? Child abuse is legal classification describing various maltreatments of children, what terms relate to child abuse. And so for the purpose of this manual, LEA Schools, it basically refers to these are the official terms. And these are taken really from State Penal Code of Texas. Student, anyone 19 years or less and or enrolled in the program of LEA. Situational abuser, an opportunist who engages in misconduct when a situation develops or exists that makes abuse possible. Preferential abuser, a perpetrator who actively seeks out children, intentionally develops a situation and grooms the victims. And victim advocate, a Christian adult who stands with a victim through the process, expressing Christian love and concern. Types of abuse, of course, there's sexual abuse. Any form of sexual activity with minor, whether in home or other setting. The abuser may be an adult, adolescent, or any minor, usually at least 4 years older than the victim. Types of abuse involving touching, fondling, inappropriate touching, oral, genital, anal penetration, intercourse, forcible rape. Types of abuse not involving touching, verbal comments and jokes with sexual innuendo, pornographic materials, pictures, videos, obscene phone calls, exhibitionism, allowing children to witness sexual activity. Physical abuse, violent non-accidental contact with which results in injury. This includes, but is not limited to, striking, biting, or shaking. Injuries include bruises, fractures, cuts, and burns. Emotional abuse, a pattern of crushing a child's spirit and attacking his or her self-worth through sarcasm, rejection, threats, terrorizing, isolating, or belittling. Emotional abuse affects a child's emotional development, leading to self-esteem, problems with feelings and emotions, and difficulty with relationships. Neglect. This includes failure to a caregiver to provide for a child's emotional needs, such as love and attention, physical needs, such as food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare, and failure to offer supervision when it is within his or her power to do so. Okay? All right, so as I was going through those, I usually preface, that there's some heavy content inside of the discussion, and so I'm going to do it after the fact. Sorry for that, but it is necessary, and that's one of the things I do appreciate about Leah Schools is there is a willingness to go ahead and just talk about these things in the open. One of the things that you'll have to understand is being a volunteer, you'll have kind of a window into students' lives, and so we have an incredible school community. And every family is different. We have families that are transitioning through different situations. Maybe there's marriages that are being dissolved and those kind of things. All I would ask is for our volunteers that if you see something that's concerning, you certainly let someone know. But I would say at the same time that we also respect our other families' privacies. One of the things is when I'm always talking to students, and my encouragement also for parents, is sometimes when we feel that urge to talk about somebody, maybe instead we should probably just go ahead and pray for that family instead. But again, if there is anything that you see that's concerning, or if a child says something that's concerning, please let a school employee know so we can be aware. All right, what are some facts about child abuse? In about 80% of cases of child abuse, the perpetrator is an adult who knows the child. There are numerous registered sex offenders within a 5-mile radius of all of our Leah School campuses. Most abuse takes place within the context of an ongoing relationship. Child abusers are often married and have their own children, and many of the reported child molestation cases are committed by adolescent males. Why are children at school potentially vulnerable? It is a community of trust. There is often ignorance of the facts. Safeguards may be ignored. There are unlimited number of opportunities to be in contact with children and students. There is easy access to children and students. There is constant need for volunteer work. Turnover among volunteer workers is high. And what is the impact of child sex abuse? Victimization of children, shattered trust, damaged families, psychological, emotional, and spiritual damage to individuals, spiritual damage to families and the school community, school community disunity and polarization, litigation, and financial costs. And so as we get to our policies, Leah volunteer policies, harassment, any type of harassment is prohibited and will not be tolerated by anyone who is employed or volunteers with Leah. Harassment includes, but is not limited to, sexual harassment, which is defined as unwelcome, unwanted, or abusive sexual advances, language, or requests. While intended to be inoffensive, social exchanges, certain types of conduct may be perceived as creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive situation. In this regard, all workers and volunteers of Leah School, should avoid, among other things, unnecessary touching, embracing, patting, pinching, poking, and grabbing. And then the other thing is I always just encourage adults, even in the middle school, even into high school. When I was a high school principal, just volunteers and teachers, my encouragement is that you avoid sarcasm, because children, even up to high school age, are rarely equipped to fully understand sarcasm. And so lots of times that's where that unintentional piece comes in. But just because it's unintentional doesn't mean that there's not a problem. So that would just be my encouragement to everybody. And that's also, of course, not just volunteers to children, but volunteers to school employees to volunteers, and volunteers to volunteers. So discriminatory or harassment through discrimination. Harassment based on race, sex, color, religion, national origin, age, military and or veteran status, or disability is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Intimidation, any conduct that has the purpose of affecting or creating intimidation, hostility, or offense, or interfering with the working environment is unacceptable and will not be permitted by Leah. Illegal substances, illegal drugs, alcohol, tobacco, and illegal performance-enhancing drugs or supplements. Leah prohibits the use of possession of illegal substances at all times when on Leah premises, while conducting Leah business or operating Leah vehicles or equipment. This policy does not include prescription drugs or inhalants when taken as directed by an individual's doctor, except as limited to operating vehicles or equipment. LEA prohibits the use of LEA prohibits the use of possession of alcohol at all times on LEA premises, on LEA businesses except for approved LEA functions. The use of alcohol is prohibited when operating any LEA-owned or rented vehicle or equipment. LEA reserves the right at all times to have authorized personnel conduct unannounced searches and for the purpose of determining whether an individual is in possession of any illegal substance, or whether an individual is in possession of any illegal substances or other items in violation of this policy. LEA also reserves a right at all times to have authorized personnel conduct urinalysis, breath and/or blood tests for the purpose of determining whether an individual is in violation of policy. Okay, so reason to believe. Texas law requires that a report be made if an individual has a reason to believe that abuse or neglect is occurring. This means that if the volunteer suspects abuse or neglect for any reason, or the suspicion must be reported, physical proof or validation is not required to make a report. And so that's an important thing to know. You don't have to have proof. You're just making a report. The agency that you report to will make the determination whether or not, you can hand it to them. If you see anything, of course, let me know. Texas law protects the reporter of suspected child abuse, neglect from any decision or award that might be sought through the filing of such a report. Under Texas law, any person participating in making a report of suspected child abuse or neglect is immune from civil or criminal liability that might otherwise be incurred as a result of such action. Any volunteer who has reason to believe that an injury, abuse, or molestation has occurred must inform the principal or immediate supervisor. The principal supervisor will assist in completing the incident report. The principal supervisor will then report the incident to LEA's executive director, Children's Protective Services, and LEA's legal counsel. The name of the alleged victim and the alleged abuser should be kept confidential. When appropriate, a victim advocate from LEA will be made available. And I always say this in every meeting, and I know it probably weirds everyone out, but if there was ever anything, as any of these things, and if at any point it was an employee or anything like that, and you had more comfort, or even if it involved me, and you had more comfort reporting that to, of course, the director of LEA Schools, that is Randy Einem, and you can simply reach out to him. All right, volunteer application. All LEA volunteers are required to complete the Lutheran Education Association of Houston volunteer application and background investigation consent forms. The information gathered on the application will help LEA provide a secure environment for those children, students that are participating in our various programs. The background consent provides permission to investigate the volunteer's background to substantiate qualifications as a volunteer. Acknowledgement, understanding, and training release. Volunteers serving in any capacity are required to read the acknowledgement, understanding, and training release form before they are permitted to volunteer. Safety guidelines and procedures. The following are some best practices, which are rule of thumb meant to create redundancies that offer an umbrella of protection for both volunteers and children and students. Okay, so we'll skip down. 2 adult rule. Ordinarily, no fewer than 2 adults should be supervising or working with minor children at a given time. Obviously, there will be times when this is not possible. Open door rule. Ordinarily, you should not close your door when conducting any class or activity. If the door has no window, then the door must always remain open unless there are 2 adults present in the room. No one-on-one rule. A volunteer should never allow oneself or another adult to be alone with a minor. If the situation arises, example, minor approaches you at the end of class or activity, take whatever steps necessary to move the discussion to a public or common area, hallway, cafeteria, outdoors. If moving to a public area is not possible, doors must remain open. There are safety in numbers. Keep the duration of such situations to a minimum. Seconds is better than not minutes. No burnt fingers. Unfortunately, touching is an action that it can times be misconstrued as inappropriate. Volunteers should never allow students to stand between their legs when seated. When comfort is needed, it may be appropriate to hold a toddler on lap for a short period of time. However, it is inappropriate for school age or older children to hold them. Nurturing touch is very important to the development of children and students. However, never touch a student in an area which would normally be covered by a bathing suit. No kissing rule. It is never appropriate to kiss or allow a kiss on the lips. Restroom rule. Never take a child into the bathroom alone. If the child is too young to handle their own personal care needs, another volunteer or adult must be present. Tell-all rule. If anything happens that you believe may put you at risk of accusations by anyone, do not keep it a secret. The LEA staff in charge of your activity should be informed, and an appropriate action, if deemed necessary, will be discussed with you. First aid rule. First aid should be administered as gently and respectfully as possible. Always ask for assistance if a child needs to be transported to the office. Overnight rules. All overnight accommodations involving children and students must be arranged so that minors staying in each room do not have more than a 4-year difference in age, except in the case of siblings. All overnight accommodations must have at least 2 minors when 1 adult is present. A minimum of 2 adults should be present at an overnight activity. If participants are both male and female, the adults should be both male and female. So, meaning if you have a mixture of students, you have boys and girls, then you need to have at least 1 male and 1 female chaperone. On outings that require that an adult share the same room as a minor, the parents or legal guardian must give consent prior, and the adult must never occupy the same bed as a minor. Males and females should sleep in separate rooms and save separate access to bathroom and have separate access to restroom facilities. Curfew for all participants must be established for overnight events, and all participations must have medical consent, waiver of liability form on file before participation. All right, transportation rule. Volunteers should not transport children, students to and from off-campus programs or activities in their personal vehicle. Exception may be granted by the principal when a parent or legal guardian provides advance written permission for the child student to be transported in a private vehicle. And we do have, we have a way to do this, and we've done it in the past. We just simply go ahead and have the students complete a permission slip with their parent signature, and then we just keep those in a binder, and just that binder travels on whatever van and in the vehicle. Discipline rule. Removal of privileges, timeout, and verbal connection can be used to preserve order and safety. No volunteer may ever use physical punishment to discipline a child. Physical restraint may only be used when the volunteer has reason to believe a child student is in danger of injuring himself or someone else. All right. And so I think that gets us to our volunteer application, which you can see there. The page after that would be the background investigation consent. And then there's the acknowledgement, understanding, training, release form. So there's your 3 forms. Okay, so if there's any questions, I'm happy at this time. I'll answer as best I can.